even if an earlier group of witnesses has already testified, in order to avoid weakening their enthusiasm in similar circumstances in the future. According to this reasoning, it is understandable that the Brisker rabbi refused to allow, to the point of getting upset with the person mentioning it, the issue of a doctor's fear of God to be discussed altogether, even when both doctors are equally expert. If it will become public knowledge that a Jewish sage showed an interest in the degree of a doctor's observance, even when both doctors possess comparable skills, this may eventually lead to a catastrophe. When a second or third person will hear the story, he will not hear all of the details. He will just be told that the degree to which the doctor was God-fearing was taken into account. They may then choose a doctor who is more God-fearing over one who is more expert. In other words, even allowing the issue to be considered could ultimately lead to a situation where lives are placed at risk. That is why the Brisker Rav did not allow it to be considered and publicly announced that it makes no difference whatsoever. It is, after all, a fact that even now, years later, the exact words he used are remembered. The reason for zealousness is that in any situation where lives are or can be at risk, it is forbidden to remain silent. Since the Brisker Rebbe recognized that even his students did not realize that this is an issue that could endanger lives, he announced that the issue should not be even mentioned at all. In this way, he strengthened the approach set forth in Jewish law that with regards to medical activities, the doctor's practical experience is the only factor to be considered. Although the doctor may boast about his skill and show no humility towards God, this is all irrelevant to his practical expertise, which is what he is being consulted for. The doctor's level of observance may be a factor when dealing with his credibility and issues pertaining to Jewish law, but not with regard to medical healing itself. In such areas, he has full credibility, for an expert would never do anything that would damage his reputation. Now, the Rebbe writes, my father-in-law, who was a previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, repeated several times the statement he had heard from his father, the Rebbe Rashab. How dear is the body of a Jew, for which so much Torah and mitzvahs were dispensed. After all, God's Torah and His commandments were given specifically to physical human beings rather than to angels. If our Creator values our bodies so much, it is obvious how careful we must be in guarding this precious article, which was given to us for safekeeping. The Torah informs us that permission was granted the doctors to heal. In other words, the doctor acts with the permission and by the command of the Torah. There is no doubt that even if heeding the doctor's orders will require one to temporarily abandon the fulfillment of some good custom or some extra stringency, the Torah will not remain in debt. Through abandoning this good deed for a short time, the person will be able to increase his dedication to Torah and mitzvahs to a much greater degree over many long and good years. In response to your letter in which you ask about your plan to study medicine, although there are several stumbling blocks which you started to enumerate. In general, as with all questions that are relevant to the Code of Jewish Law, you should turn to a local halakhic Jewish law authority, since an actual ruling involves knowledge of many specific details which cannot always be easily put in writing. In this case, there is not even a need to attempt to do so, since there are local rabbis in your neighborhood to whom you can turn to clarify and discuss the issues face to face. The main point is that something that is forbidden according to the Code of Jewish Law is absolutely forbidden. What benefit is to be had by fooling yourself as if it's possible to come up with some type of leniency, when a halakhic authority who is expert in this field tells you clearly that this is not so? As our sages said about a mitzvah it achieved through committing a transgression, when the robber blesses, he has scorned the Lord. All right, so that's very interesting. I think that we should know the Torah view, saying, okay, yeah, sure, I go to the doctor, but Torah wants you to go to the doctor. And again, I think that's the beginning of our theme, that science and religion go hand in hand, and not saying, well, I'm going to doctor and I should be praying, but I'll go to doctor. No, Torah wants you to go to the doctor. We have a few more minutes left, and we have a short essay about science, but taking us to a different realm because we're talking about life on other planets. Many people do ask me this question. That's why I'm bringing it out here, because people say, they go to Mars and we have all these things. So let's see about what Torah says about life on other planets, and specifically what the Rebbe has to say. The question as to whether life exists on other planets is not directly related to Torah and its commandments, mitzvot. However, since people are interested in knowing Torah's view on this issue, we must fulfill the sage's promise that as long as there are questions and debates, someone will be found to provide an answer. When people receive a response to these questions, they may then be more ready to listen to God's voice, to put on tefillin, keep Shabbos, and kosher. I therefore respond that this is clearly dealt with in the Talmud. The question is never heard about the statement in the Talmud, but it can be found in two instances. In Tractate Shavuos, the tractate which traditionally studied in Torah yeshivas, and in Moed Katan. It was in these weeks in 1969, and just by the way, that man first landed on the moon. These statements were added to the Talmud after we reached the moon. The Talmud was printed centuries ago. They weren't added just recently. It was compiled hundreds of years before that, all the way back to the original source, which was said to Moses at Sinai. In the Song of Devorah, in the book of Shoftim, Judges, about the war between Barak and Sisera, the verse says, "Cursed is Maros," said the angel of the Lord, "bitterly accursed shall all be its inhabitants." The Talmud offers two possible interpretations to identify Maros. Who's Maros? According to the second interpretation, Maros is the name of a star. As we know, the stars assisted the Jewish people in that war. They fought from heavens, the stars from their orbits fought. This star, which was Sisera's star, obviously did not help the Jews out. Thus Barak made the following oath, "Cursed be Maros," said the angel of the Lord, "bitterly accursed shall be its inhabitants." According to this, there are inhabitants on the star. In fact, Rashi quotes both interpretations in his commentary to Shoftim. Rabbi Nachman attempts to explain that its inhabitants refers to nearby stars. However, there are many problems with that approach, and in any event, is definitely not the simple meaning of the Talmud statement and of the verse according to the Rashi. On another occasion, the Rebbe was asked, according to Torah, is there a possibility that there exists other civilization besides on earth? His response, according to the Torah, there may be extraterrestrial life forms. Mention of these is found in the Talmud. Civilizations, however, which would mean intelligent life forms, are a different stories. According to Torah, the definitely quality of intelligent life, as the case with man, the presence of free choice. Moreover, the existence of free choice and man's ability to utilize it is only possible by virtue of the Torah. Therefore, if we were to assume that there was intelligent life somewhere else in the universe, they would have to have Torah. That is impossible. They cannot have their own different Torah, since the Torah is truth, and there can only be one truth. Yet it is also impossible to assume that they have our Torah. After all, the story of how the Torah was given to the Jewish people on earth is described in Torah in great detail. Much attention is focused on these details because they are important for our very understanding of the Torah. In other words, according to Judaism's viewpoint, it is possible that life exists elsewhere in the universe, but societies of intelligent or human life do not exist anywhere but on earth. Thank you very much for listening to idea that Judaism and science can work hand in hand and can be complementary. Thank you very much.